A couple that stand out to me in terms of what I'm most interested in, and I do want to stress that that's me as a sort of an individual pharmacist and not necessarily speaking on ICER's behalf, but I've been particularly interested in some of the topical and intradermal gene therapies that we're seeing in the epidermolysis bullosa space. Some of what makes that stand out to me is related to the fact that typically when we think about gene therapies, we typically think about something that is administered one time and it's kind of one and done. And what we're seeing in the epidermolysis bullosa space is that these products have the potential for repeat administration over time for these patients. We're talking about administering agents to potentially facilitate healing of different wounds. And I'm really fascinated by the fact that we've got this new use case where there's potential to see perhaps a desire to combine more than one of these agents, and that there is a potential for patients to continue to receive treatment with these products periodically over time. So I think that's the one that stands out the most to me as being interesting from a technical sort of science space. I think more than half of the 23 emerging products that I'll be highlighting, more than half of them are already at the FDA with an FDA decision expected sometime this year. One of the emerging gene therapies that I alluded to for epidermolysis bullosa is expecting an FDA decision possibly by the end of April. That drug is, I'm going to refer to it as PZ-cel. It's a very complicated name, as I'm sure you know. We also have a few other products in the gene therapy space that are nearing potential FDA approval. We have RPL102 is a gene therapy seeking approval for Fanconi anemia. That's one where their BLA has been initiated, and so it's possible we could see an FDA decision sometime this year. We also have within the neurology space, there's a cell therapy called deramiocel. That's another product that I know is expecting an FDA decision, I believe in late August of this year. So just to name a few. I can't necessarily speak to how you make the case for it, but I can speak to, some of the challenges there. I think the main challenge is we're talking about a much more significant expense or the potential for a more significant expense over time. Exactly as you mentioned, instead of having a price for a treatment that you expect to be delivered once and that's it, it's difficult to know how many rounds of treatment patients might require with these agents and for what period of time throughout their life. I think in terms of making the case, that's, for why that would be important or, making that case for payers, I think that's kind of an inherent challenge with all of the drugs that I'll be speaking about. Really understanding the value that those drugs provide to put their price into perspective is the struggle that I think payers are tasked with. And I know I'm coming from the ICER perspective, but I think, that for me, that's where health technology assessment can really come into play. It's a really valuable tool when trying to understand not just how well does a drug work in clinical trials, but what is the value it provides to patients, and how can we potentially connect that with a price that's fairly aligned with that value and criteria from a utilization management perspective that affords fair access to that treatment.